faithfully conveying value, interpreting great books worldwide. Hello, this is Sally's Book Club. I'm Zhang Zhan, also the Chinese translator of the book we're introducing today. Today's book is The Silk Road, A New History by Yale historian Professor Hansen. Unlike many books on the topic, this one doesn't just skim through historical tales. It focuses on the Silk Road itself. Using archaeological findings and ancient documents, the author restores the true historical face of the Silk Road, covering everything from politics, ecology, and religion to economics, commerce, and cultural exchange. Mention the Silk Road, and people picture long camel caravans, silks, spices, and foreign merchants with deep-set eyes, high noses, curly hair, and blue eyes slowly trekking through deserts to camel bells. This suggests ancient civilizations connected through peaceful, private trade, along with goods, ideas, and cultures blended too. But this lovely image doesn't match historical reality. Actually, before the 11th century, pre-Northern Song dynasty, the Silk Road thrived due to political powers vying for Central Asia, especially Central Plains dynasties, garrisons boosting local commerce. The long-distance bulk trade wasn't mainstream here, and caravans faced strict government controls, no free passage. Later, as political fervor faded, powers withdrew from Central Asia, and the route was forgotten. Not until modern times did Western explorers and scholars rediscover it through unearthed artifacts and texts. The term Silk Road was coined by German geographer Richthofen. In 1868, commissioned by Germany, he surveyed China to explore a Shandong, Germany railway, creating a 5-volume atlas. In this atlas, he drew a trans-Eurasian line named Seidenstrasse, the Silk Road's first appearance, and named it for historical legitimacy. Ancient Roman women adored silk, importing it massively. Romans imagined silk growing on trees, combed off in a land called Ceres, meaning silk, which was China. So Richthofen drew this straight line connecting Chang'an and Rome. But at this stage, the Silk Road was merely an annotation on the atlas. It was Richthofen's student who truly perfected this concept. The Swedish explorer Sven Hedin was passionately devoted to exploration, venturing into Xinjiang before turning 30. After each expedition, he published books detailing his experiences, which became immensely popular in Europe. One such book was titled The Silk Road, solidifying the term's popularity and establishing clear temporal and spatial boundaries. Temporally, the Silk Road expanded beyond the Han and Roman eras to include the Tang dynasty and later periods. Spatially, it contracted significantly, confined mainly to Xinjiang and Central Asia. Through subsequent scholars' efforts, our understanding of the Silk Road's specifics grew clearer. The route began at modern-day Xi'an, traversed the Hexi corridor to Dunhuang. From Dunhuang, two paths emerged. One southwest along the Taklamakan Desert's southern edge through Hotan to Kashgar, the other following the desert's northern rim. Passing through Turpan and Kucha to Kashgar, both routes converged there. Thereafter, the Silk Road continued westward into Central Asia. It passed through Central Asia's two most vital cities, Samarkand and Bukhara, located in present-day Uzbekistan. Regions further west belong to Iran, beyond the scope of Hansen's book. Hansen's work focuses on 7 key Silk Road sites: Lulan, Kucha, Gaochang, Samarkand, Chang'an, Dunhuang, and Khotan. It reconstructs this route according to its historical rise and decline. Now, allow me to recount this true historical panorama. Lulan is the Silk Road's most enigmatic site. The verse, "Through countless battles, armor pierced, we won't return till Lulan's breached," refers precisely here. Located west of Lopner in eastern Xinjiang today, it now lies in ruins. But from the Three Kingdoms period onward, it hosted the Protectorate of the Western Regions, the highest administrative authority Central Plains dynasties used to control the area. Yet by the 4th century AD, Lulan vanished without trace, until 1900, when a shovel revealed this legendary city. That March, while surveying along the Conqueror River north of the desert, Sven Hedden realized he'd left a shovel at the previous campsite. He had no choice but to send his assistant back to retrieve the shovel, but unexpectedly, the assistant stumbled upon an ancient site and brought back several exquisite wooden carvings. Sven Hedden immediately returned to excavate, where he found many Chinese documents from the Western Jin period, which included the words Lulan, thus bringing the long-lost Lulan back to light. So, what was Lulan like before it disappeared? At that time, Lulan was politically controlled by the Central Plains regimes in China and economically dependent on supplies from the inland government. In the ruins of the Protectorate of the Western Region's office walls, some letters were discovered. These letters were written by Li Bai, who was the governor dispatched to the Western regions by the former Liang regime during the Eastern Jin and 16 Kingdoms period. This former Liang existed in the mid-10th century AD, with its capital in today's Wuwei, Gansu. Thus, it can be seen that Lulan was still controlled by inland regimes thousands of miles away. Additionally, Chinese documents from the Lulan site recorded the lives of the troops stationed there. Since the Han Dynasty, Central Plains dynasties began garrison farming in the western regions, where stationed troops cultivated their own land to produce food. Similar to today's Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, documents show that Lulan's troops grew barley, wheat, and millet using oxen and horses and hired locals to plow the fields. The government stipulated that each soldier received 1 daoblo and 2 sheng of grain daily, but the garrison farm's yield wasn't enough to cover this. Local officials then used military pay dispatched from Dunhuang or Lianzhou to buy grain from locals, as silk was lightweight, high value, and low cost to transport. Therefore, military pay was mostly distributed in the form of silk fabrics. At that time, silk fabrics served as currency. Soldiers used their pay to buy food and clothing locally, injecting vitality into the economy. This remained the primary economic model in the Western regions until the Tang Dynasty. Contrary to the imagined spontaneous private trade, the prosperity of the Western region's economy relied instead on financial inputs and supplies from the central government. By the mid to late 4th century, desertification intensified, forcing the abandonment of Lulan. The southern route of the Silk Road, where Lulan was located, also lost its former prosperity. People shifted to the northern edge of the Taklamakan Desert, and the most important oasis in this region is the second historical site to be introduced, Kucha, where Buddhism flourished. The pronunciation of Kunzes is a bit special. The first character is turtle, and the second is the right half of taste. Kucha is today's Kuka County in Xinjiang, located midway along the northern edge of the Taklamakan Desert. It was the most prosperous area on the northern Silk Road and the gateway for Buddhism's entry into China. The most famous figure here is Kumarajiva, who traveled around India in his youth. After completing his studies, he returned to his homeland and became a revered monk at a young age. Later, when Central Plains dynasties controlled Kucha, Kumarajiva was treated as an invaluable treasure and was eventually invited through various means to Chang'an by the rulers. Though there was some element of coercion, Kumarajiva spent his final 12 years in Chang'an. During this time, he translated numerous Buddhist scriptures, including the most famous Diamond Sutra, Lotus Sutra, and Vimalakirti Sutra. Because his translations were accessible and easy to understand, they were widely beloved by followers and remain in use today. Beyond Kumarajiva, Kucha also left behind numerous painted cave complexes, the most famous being the Kizil Caves. Most caves feature a central pillar design where a large stone pillar stands in the center, allowing devotees to circumambulate while viewing murals depicting Buddha's past and present lives, typically showing his great compassion and self-sacrifice. German explorer Albert von Lecoq came here and unceremoniously chiseled off large sections of murals to adorn German museums, claiming they'd be destroyed if left locally. But man proposes, heaven disposes. The most exquisite murals taken from Xinjiang were destroyed in WWE bombings. Since Kucha was Buddhism's gateway to China, does that mean people could freely travel the Silk Road? Here comes another reality check for your imagination. Travelers on the Silk Road, monks or merchants, were strictly controlled by the government. Take merchants. To travel the Silk Road, they needed official travel passes issued by authorities. This pass was called guosuo. When passing checkpoints, they had to surrender it. At border checkpoints, they'd submit their guosuo to receive a new one before proceeding to the next station. So, caravans could only move along designated routes. This was how ancient states controlled population movement within their territories. At a Kucha site, French sinologist Paul Pelliot discovered over 130 preserved Guasuo documents. These relics from Kucha's final years followed fixed formats, listing issuing and receiving officials' names, addresses, salutations, and holders' name. They then detailed caravan composition, numbers of men, women, slaves, horses, and other livestock. If the number of people and horses doesn't match what's on the pass, they won't be allowed through, showing how strict government control was on the Silk Road back then. However, to fully grasp the living conditions of people in the Western regions at that time, the examples from Lulan and Kucha still feel a bit thin. Next up, let's dive into the most storied spot on the Silk Road, Gaochang, which is today's Turpan. When talking about Gaochang, we got to mention the tale of the Tang monks' scripture quest. In 629 AD, the Tang monk Xuanzang smuggled out from Guazhou, near today's Dunhuan, facing the toughest part of his whole journey. He'd hired a Sogdian old man as a guide, but the old guy saw things weren't looking good, chickened out after a bit, and only left his old horse for Xuanzang. Xuanzang had no choice but to trek through the desert alone. Midway, he accidentally fumbled his water skin and spilled all the water. Later, thanks to the old horse from the Sogdian man, he found a water source and barely survived. When Xuanzang reached Gaochang, his luck did a complete 280. Back then, King Quante of Gaochang heard Xuanzang was coming and rushed out with torches at night to welcome him. Next morning, before Xuanzang even got up, the king was waiting at the door to be the first to hear him. The king loved the teachings of Master Xuanzang, who was only in his late 20s, so much he wanted to keep him in Gaochang forever. Xuanzang went on a hunger strike in protest, and finally they compromised. The king and the master became sworn brothers. The master taught for a month and promised to return via Gaochang after his studies to teach for 3 more years. Only then did the king agree and prepare gifts and travel funds. Oh, those funds were something else. Plenty of gold, silver, and silk. For Xuanzang's 20-year journey, he got 25 attendants, 30 horses, and letters of introduction to kings along the way and the Khan of the Western Turks. With this big sponsor's backing, his westward trip finally smoothed out. But whoa, in 643 AD, when he was returning from India, the Western region scene had changed big time. 3 years earlier, Emperor Taizong of Tang, Li Shiman's army, had crushed the Gaochang regime. Gaochang was renamed Shizhou and folded into the Tang administration, becoming the westernmost prefecture in Tang territory. Gaochang was gone, Kualente dead, and that old promise couldn't be kept. In 2016, Archaeologists found a fragment of the Great Tang records on the western regions in Turpan, older than any existing version. Scholars speculate Xuanzang gifted this to Huan Wante's son, Huan Jizan, in Luoying shortly after completing the book, and he brought it back to Gaochang. This was Xuanzang's way of repaying the old king. Our deep understanding of Gaochang today comes mainly from its extremely dry climate and unique burial custom. Locals made paper clothes and shoes from scrap paper to dress the dead. Later, archaeologists excavated the Astana and Karakoja cemeteries in Turpan on a large scale, unearthing vast quantities of these paper garments. To locals, this was just waste paper. For historians, it's a treasure trove. These papers were discarded government documents, household registries, contracts, letters, prescriptions, student homework, genuine primary sources, way more reliable than later compiled official histories. Scholars carefully unfolded the folded paper shoes. The daily life of ancient Turpan people unfolded before our eyes. First, the Central Plains administrative system was implemented only in Gaochang within the western regions. West of Gaochang, the Tang only stationed troops without civil officials. After conquering Gaochang, the Tang renamed it Azhou and fully implemented the Central Plains prefecture county system. The Tang government stipulated each family received state-allocated land, part returned upon the householder's death, the rest inheritable. Once Zizhu was established, the government created household registries listing each family's population and land allocation. These registries were updated every 3 years. Obsolete ones sold as scrap paper became burial clothes, ironically preserving them. Second, Silk Road trade was small-scale, with heavy Sogdian involvement. This is strikingly clear in Gaochang's documents. Sogdians hailed from Central Asia's city-states, Bukhara, An Kingdom, Samarkand, Kham Kingdom, Tashkent, Shi Kingdom, etc. In China, Sogdians assimilated, adopting Chinese names and using their homeland as surnames, A, Kang, Shi, etc. Hence, Chinese histories sometimes called them the 9 surnames of Zhaowu. Some famous Chinese figures had Sogdian roots: An Lushan, Shi Siming, even later Jin's founding emperor Shi Jingtang. Their distinctive names make them easily identifiable in documents. In Turpan, a set of documents made from 10 shoe patterns was unearthed, recording the locals' trading conditions. Among the 48 buyers and sellers, 41 were Sogdians. This shows the dominant position of the Sogdians in Silk Road commerce. The traded goods were mainly gold, silver, silk, and spices, with generally small transaction amounts. Gold transactions were no more than half a jin, silver up to 8 jin, and the largest was only 800 jin, easily hauled by a few livestock. Additionally, foreign merchants brought religions besides Buddhism to Gaochang, most notably Manichaeism and Christianity. Manichaeism originated in the 3rd century AD in Iraq under the Iranian Sassanid Empire, founded by Mani. Its core is a peculiar Christian heresy blended with Iranian dualism, teaching that the world has 2 origins, light and darkness, which were peaceful until darkness invaded light, leading to the mixed, conflicted era we live in. The religious aim of Manichaean followers is to help light expel all invading darkness, restoring separation between the two. Manichaeism also adopted Buddhism's monastic system, dividing followers into ordained, elect, and lay people, with heroes supporting the elect. The elect focus solely on refining light elements to battle darkness. According to Manichaean doctrine, melons contain the most light elements, so the elect eat them, while heroes provide them. Manichaeism is practically the melon-eating religion, explaining its popularity in Turpan. Germans found color illustrations in Turpan depicting Manichaean rituals, with images of fruit plates full of melon seeds. Of course, Manichaeism wasn't the only religion in Turpan. Christianity also appeared in Gaocheng, belonging to the Eastern Church, known as Nestorianism in the Tang Dynasty. Eastern Church doctrine holds that Jesus Christ has divine and human natures. So the Virgin Mary is the mother of human Jesus, not divine Christ. The church's base was in modern-day Iraq, using Syriac in worship. So Syriac documents were unearthed in Turpan. The more common were Sogdian texts in Syriac script, showing most believers were Sogdians. As the Silk Road's key commercial people, Sogdians have featured repeatedly in our story. To tell the Sogdian story well, we gotta start from their hometown, Samarkand, to see this most active commercial people on the Silk Road and their ancient religion. First off, how far is Samarkand from China? Back when Xuanzang left Gaocheng, he passed through Kucha, crossed the Tian Shan Mountains, entered the grasslands, and headed west to the Hot Sea, which is Lake Issyk-Kul in today's Kyrgyzstan. Issyk means hot in Turkic. The lake's bottom has hot springs, so it never freezes, thus the name. Near the west of the Hot Sea, in Suyab City, Xuanzang met the ruler of the grasslands, the Khan of the Western Turks, then continued west into Sogdian territory. This region lies between Central Asia's two most important rivers, the Sirdarya and Amudarya, roughly equivalent to Sogdian areas in today's Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. There was no unified government, just many scattered city-states. The two most important city-states were Kangju in Samarkand and Anju in Bukhara. These two cities were like Chang'an and Luoyang of Central Asia. When Xuanzang arrived, he recorded his impressions of the Sogdians. Their cunning, father and son both, chasing profit, even scheming against each other, fitting the Tang stereotype of Sogdians as skilled trader seeking gain. Historical records say Sogdians fed honey to a newborn son's mouth and put blue on his hands, hoping he'd grow up to speak sweetly and hold on to money. It's also said Sogdians left home at 20 to do business, going wherever profit could be made. These claims aren't unfounded. Actually, Sogdians crisscrossed Central Asia, building trade networks way before the Tang Dynasty. In 1907, British archaeologist Arel Stein explored ancient Great Wall beacon towers near Dunhuang and found an abandoned mailbag with 8 Sogdian letters. These letters, called the Ancient Sogdian Letters, preserve tons of precious historical info, reflecting Sogdian trade networks on the Silk Road. The sender of letters 1 and 3 was a Sogdian woman named Mina. Letter 1 was to her mom. Mina wanted to leave Dunhuang, but her husband was gone. No other Sogdian relatives would help, though a priest offered camels and people to escort her. But she didn't know if he'd keep his word. The recipient of letter 3 was Miana's husband, and this letter was far from pleasant. Mia started right off saying, "I might as well be dead right now. Stuck in Dunhuang for 3 years, I had 1, 2, even 5 chances to leave. None worked out. I begged this person and that. No one could take me to my husband, or even back to my mother. I came to Dunhuang on your word, ignoring my mom and brothers. And this is where it got me. Listening to you that day must have offended the heavens. Marrying a pig or dog would have been better than you, I swear." That last line, crossing 1,000 years, still rings painfully familiar today. At letter 3's end was a short note from Mina's daughter to her father. "Send 20 taels of silver to support us. You won't miss it anyway." But why were Mina and her daughter so desperate to leave Dunhuang? The answer lies in historical clues from letter 2. Letter 2 was sent from the capital, today's Lanzhou, to Samarkand in Central Asia. It mentioned news from inland China. The last emperor fled Luoyang due to famine. Fires ravaged palaces and cities. Luoyang and Yecheng were gone. It spoke of invading Huns who were just yesterday the emperor's servants. The letter asked, could remaining Chinese drive them from Chang'an, or would they occupy China long term? Historians deduced these letters were early 4th century, referencing Luoyang's fire as the Yongjia disturbance, ending the Western Jin dynasty. This was during the uprising of the Five Barbarians. Huns established former Zhao in northern Shanxi, exploited Western Jin's chaos to sack Luoying, ending the dynasty and starting 200 plus years of fragmentation. The letter noted Sogdians and Indians starving in Luoyang, matching Chinese records of cannibalistic famine there. These letters are a vivid snapshot of ordinary lives caught in history's torrent. Beyond this backdrop, we see Sogdians had penetrated deep into China for trade 300 plus years before the Tang dynasty. Even in turmoil, Sogdians tirelessly conducted business through their networks, though these letters never reached their recipients. We don't know what became of that mother and daughter, but the Sogdians' tireless efforts truly made their homeland flourish. Outside modern Samarkand, there's a site called Afrasiab. This site was once a grand room of a Sogdian noble, its walls covered with murals over 2 meters high. When painted, Samarkand's king was Vargoman, who Tang Emperor Gaozong appointed as governor of Kangju Protectorate. His seal appeared in Tang diplomatic records. Ironically, while Ten saw Sogdia as a distant barbarian state, these murals depict Samarkand as the world's center. 42 envoys, Chinese, Koreans, and neighboring kingdoms line up reverently to offer tribute to Samarkand's king. The Chinese presented silkworm cocoons and threads, proving smooth silk trade between Central Asia and inland China. 60 kilometers east of Samarkand, in today's Tajikistan, lies a larger site, Panjakent. The 6th to 8th century town revealed markets, shops, inns, and thousands of coins, proof of past prosperity where commerce and religion coexisted. Many religious relics emerged here. Most Sogdians followed Zoroastrianism, which, with Manichaeism and Nestorianism, formed the three foreign religions, key Silk Road imports besides Buddhism. Sadly, these religions never flourished in China and were later banned by authorities. Now, the character Tu, she, combines Shim, spirit, and Tian, sky, pronounced like Tian Shen merged. Ancient Chinese invented this character specifically, don't mispronounce it, also called fire worship, since rituals at eternal fire altars made outsiders think they worshipped fire. Actually, Zoroastrians don't worship fire. It's another dualistic faith. They believe in two cosmic origins, good versus evil, representing light and darkness, purity and filth, and other opposites. These forces constantly battle, and Zoroastrians must aid the good. Ahura Mazda, the benevolent creator, fights Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit. They view life, fire, water, and earth as pure, but corpses as impure. So Zoroastrians can't cremate, waterbury, or earthbury. That'd pollute fire, water, and soil. Their solution: let vultures or dogs consume the body, then collect bones for burial in clay urns. These bone urns, called ossuaries, are iconic Zoroastrian artifacts. This unique practice continues among Zoroastrians in Iran and India's Gujarat. Their towers of silence are now tourist sites, viewable only from outside. At Panjakant, families stored ossuaries in small mud brick structures, a Central Asian specialty. Now, having explored Sogdian Samarkand, let's discuss the Silk Road's turning point. Just as Sogdians thrived commercially, transformative forces emerged. First, west of Samarkand. In the early 7th century, Islam arose in Arabia's west, uniting tribes. Within decades, it conquered vast Middle Eastern and North African territories. By early 8th century, Arab general Qutayba invaded Central Asia. Sogdian, Samarkand, and Bukhara fell to Muslim rule. Over the next 200 years, Sogdians gradually converted to Islam, abandoning language and identity. The Sogdian people as a distinct ethnic group vanished. While Central Asia transformed gradually, the Silk Road's eastern end collapsed suddenly and decisively. Tang influence evaporated from Central Asia almost overnight. In 755 CE, war drums shook earth from Yuyang, The An Lushan rebellion erupted. Tang troops withdrew from Central Asia to defend the capital. Though quelled after 8 years, the weakened Tang never regained the western regions. The Silk Road lost its main patron and declined. Okay, that wraps part one of the Silk Road. A new history covering the name's origin, mysterious Lulan, Buddhist Kucha, Gaochang, first to host Swanzan, and Samarkand, homeland of the Sogdian traders. These four major Silk Road hubs. Records from these sites show Central Plains dynasties, garrisons, injected commercial vitality into the region. This vibrant trade network faced strict government controls and consisted mainly of small-scale transactions. Sogdian merchants were the most active players in this commercial network. In the next episode, we'll explore how Buddhism, Manichaeism, Nestorianism, and Zoroastrianism spread along the Silk Road through merchant mobility. I'll continue with three more Silk Road sites: Chang'an, Dunhuang, and Khotan, plus the Silk Road's historical end. Reading notes below the audio. See you next time.